let's talk about some of the darkest acts that happened in a cult in the 1980s. A self-proclaimed prophet named Michael Ryan established the Church of Yahweh in the early 1980s. During this time, the farm crisis was the worst it had been since the Great Depression. Production outpaced demand, leading prices and profits to fall. Confronted with bankruptcy, foreclosures, and looming poverty, many turned to religion while others looked for someone to blame. Ryan preached a blend of white supremacist ideology, anti-government sentiments, and apocalyptic beliefs. He was able to attract a small community who were drawn to his charismatic personality and the promises he made of a utopian community. Under his influence, the church combined religious and extremist views, including racial superiority, conspiracy theories, and Ryan even convinced his followers that violent actions were necessary to prepare for the end of times, resulting in many victims suffering under his command when they disobeyed him. The first to do so were cult members James Thim and Rick Stice, who had a 5-year-old son named Luke Stice. They expressed doubts about the validity of Ryan's teachings and beliefs. This is when the two men were demoted to slaves and made to sleep outside, chained to a porch and at various points to copulate with a goat and sodomize each other as punishment. He also forced the father and son to perform fellatio on each other. Ryan repeatedly abused Stice's young boy and called him names. Stice would later testify that Ryan put ashes from his cigarette in Luke's mouth, spit on him, shot him in the arm, and tied a whip around the boy's neck to lift him up off the ground. Around March 25, 1985, Ryan, who was 6'2" and weighed over 230 pounds, would slam the 5-year-old boy into a cabinet, resulting in a fatal head injury. He then ordered Thim and Stice to bury him in a shallow, unmarked grave. In the weeks following his son's death, Stice repeatedly ran away from the cult and was able to leave for good on April 4th. However, Ryan's wrath then turned to James Thim. On April 27, 1985, he was beaten by Ryan and the other male members of the cult after being accused of poisoning a turkey being eaten at the communal meal. He was taken to the former pig pens where he endured days of horrific physical and sexual abuse before being murdered. He endured being sodomized with a shovel and pick, causing grievous internal injuries, received 75 lashes, then the men shot off the tips of Thim's fingers on his left hand. The horror didn't stop there though. Ryan broke Thim's arm and removed skin from his leg with a razor blade and pliers. Afterwards, he commanded his 15-year-old son at the time to break Thim's legs. Finally, Ryan stomped on Thim's chest, breaking his ribs, and ordered another member to execute him with a blow to the head. Thim was then buried in an unmarked grave. Ryan would have kept going on his tirade of claiming victims if it wasn't for 2 of his members who assisted in Thim's murder being arrested. After the gruesome and horrible acts committed on a cult member and a 5-year-old boy by cult leader Michael Ryan, things settled for a couple months until June 1985. James Haverkamp and John Andreas, 2 members who assisted in the torture and murder of the victims, were arrested in Kansas for stealing farm machinery. As a result, authorities raided the farm and found weapons that included 150,000 rounds of ammunition and over $250,000 worth of stolen property. While in custody, Haverkamp and Andreas told the police about the murders, and another raid in late August turned up the dead bodies of 5-year-old Luke Stice and a cult member James Thim. Michael Ryan, his son Dennis Ryan, who was 16 at the time, and Timothy Haverkamp were all charged with first-degree murder. Michael and Dennis Ryan went on trial in March 1986. When asked why he participated in the torture and murder of James Thim, Dennis Ryan replied, "Because that's what Yahweh wanted," which is Hebrew for the word God. After 18 days of testimony, both were found guilty. Michael of first degree, his son of second degree. In October 1986, Michael Ryan was sentenced to death. Dennis Ryan was sentenced to life in prison, but was released in 1997, just 12 years after the sentence, and pleading guilty to manslaughter. Haverkamp and Andreas were sentenced to 26 years for assault charges, but were released in 1998. On May 24, 2015, after 30 years in prison and several stays of execution, Michael Ryan died on death row at the age of 66 from cancer. When Dennis Ryan was told his father was dying, he stated, "Best for everybody. Good riddance. Flush him down the toilet for all I care." He hadn't spoken to his father since their arrests and convictions. Dennis Ryan and the other former cult members give shocking testimonies in an episode of Deadly Cults, for those who are still interested in this case.
All about my toxic ex. So to provide some context, my ex-boyfriend and I started dating at the beginning of year 12. We were both 17, we were together for about a year and a half, and I broke up with him just before I turned 19. And oh, that boy put me through my paces, let me tell you. Before we actually started dating, we were just like messaging back and forth. This was about a week before we made things official. He's telling me about why he likes me. And then out of nowhere, he just sends a message being like, "Yeah, so you know, that was the moment that I fell in love with you." Like, what? We weren't even officially dating. This boy was not my boyfriend. But when you are 17 and you like a boy and they say something like that to you, of course you get all flattered. So, I mean, at first I was a little freaked out, but then I was like, he said he's in love with me. No, ma'am, that is love bombing. Because there was a lot of that in the first couple weeks and then it immediately dropped off. Like once he had me, he didn't have to try anymore. Now this boy was quite cruel with his words. He quite often did not think before he spoke, and the way he spoke to me is not a way that you should speak to someone that you claim to love. Now I've spoken about this before on here, But when I was in school, I had really bad acne, and around the age of 17 was kind of when it was at its worst, and it made me feel really, really insecure about myself. And I remember one day we're at his house and we're just watching a movie, and I'm having a particularly rough day with my skin. We're sitting there watching the movie and I'm kind of just touching my forehead like this, which I know is like the absolute number one thing you should not do when you have acne, but when you are so insecure about it, you're kind of just very focused on, it's just always there, like it's always on your mind. So I'm just sitting there, I'm kind of touching it, and I just kind of go, my acne makes me feel so ugly sometimes. And this boy has the audacity to say, yeah, well, it is ugly. For the remainder of the movie, I literally laid there and I kept my hand over my forehead because I didn't want him to see my acne. I was like, my boyfriend, this boy who I love and who claims to love me, thinks that my acne is ugly, so I must be ugly. One day, I remember it was a Sunday, and this is when I was working at Priceline. I didn't get my driver's license until after I left high school, whereas he had his driver's license and he had his own car. And on this particular day, my parents were not able to pick me up from work. And on Sundays, he would play baseball. At the Priceline I worked at, Sunday shifts only went for 3 hours, and when you work any less than 4 hours, you do not get a tea break, which meant that I did not have the opportunity to check my phone until after my shift. So I'm at work, I finish my shift, I get my stuff, I go to check my phone, and I just have this sinking feeling. I checked my phone and I had a text from him saying, oh, I'm not going to be able to pick you up from work. The team want me to play a second game that I'm going to hang back for. Immediately, I panicked because my parents are out. They're not able to come and get me. He was my only way home. I was calling him. I was texting him. He wasn't picking up my calls. He wasn't responding to my texts. I could not get through to him. And I didn't know what to do. I honestly did not know how I was going to get home. I call my mum, absolutely sobbing, crying on the phone, saying, he's ditched me, I don't know how to get home. Mum and dad were actually running late for their lunch that they had to be at, so what they did was that they turned around, came and picked me up and brought me home. I was crying in the car the entire way home. Mum was really trying to calm me down. After I'd calmed down a bit, I sent him a text about how that wasn't okay. He didn't really apologize. He just kind of like beat around the bush a little bit and was like, oh, well, what do you want me to do? Like, they wanted me for a second game. The next day he texted me and he was like, hey, do you want to go shopping? And this was his way of apologizing. Like, this was his way of saying sorry without actually saying sorry. And at this time, this is when I firstly started making TikToks. And I remember one of my TikToks got like 10,000 views or something, and I was so excited about it. So we're driving home from the shops and I pull up my phone and I say, oh my God, babe, one of my TikToks got 10,000 views. And then he turns around and he goes, you're making TikToks? And then I immediately start getting like really like feeling like I'm backed up into a corner, and I'm like, yeah, but you know, I'm not like dancing or anything, like I'm just making tutorials, like I'm just talking about makeup and stuff. And then he was like, babe, I love you, but I do not respect you. And I was really upset with that. So double whammy, ditches me at work and then insults me to my face like that within less than 48 hours. So anyway, I was really, really disheartened by that, and I went home that day and I had deleted all the TikToks that I made, and I couldn't bring myself to make another one because every time I tried, I just had him in the back of my mind telling me that he no longer respected me. Fast forward a few months, his parents came over to my house to have dinner with us, and the two of us were at a party, and my mum brought up that day and was like, oh, so what was this second game that he had to play? And then his dad goes, oh, there was no second game. Everyone wanted to have drinks at the pub after. And when my mum told me that, I was so upset because not only did this boy, again, ditch me at work, but he lied to me as to why he ditched me at work. And I'm pretty sure my mum told me this when I was still with him, and I did nothing about it. Anyway, that is all I have for you right now. I know you guys have been absolutely loving my story times, so please let me know if you want a part 2 of this because, oh, trust me, I have so many more stories. And before we wrap this up, I just want to say, if you have someone in your life who is treating you like this, girl, you deserve better. If I can get out of it and if I can better myself, so can you. And somehow the ex managed to watch my last TikTok, the one that I made about him. But despite the fact that I have him blocked on every single social media platform and I have his phone number blocked. And because he can't get through to me, he decided to reach out to my younger sister. He DM'd her on Instagram, and all the DM said was, "Can you tell your sister that she is out of line?" We only spent one Valentine's Day together. I remember the night before, I stayed the night at his house, and when I woke up the next morning, I woke up so sick. But we had plans that night. We were going to go to Kings Park to watch the sunset, and then we were going to go watch a movie. If you live in Perth, you'll know what Kings Park is. Anyway, he drives me home. I literally spend the day in bed, and then when it comes time to get ready, I just get out of bed, I suck it up, and I get ready. He comes over and he is in an absolute mood. We're trying to figure out what we want to do for dinner. He was like, "I want KFC." And I said, this boy literally used to eat KFC on like a daily basis, and every time we spent time together we would eat KFC. And I was like, please, it is Valentine's Day, I want to do something special. Also, again, like I mentioned, I was really sick, so I did not feel like having that fast food. But he literally sat there in my room, cracked the shits until eventually he got his way, and I was like, fine, we'll get KFC. Anyway, because we were kind of having that dispute, we left my house late, like too late. And on Valentine's Day, Kings Park is absolutely packed. So by the time we got there, they had blocked off the parking and we couldn't get in. And that was the only thing I wanted from that whole day, was to sit and watch the sunset, because I thought that that would just be so romantic. So he's like, okay, well, do you just want to go to Coogee Beach? And I mean, it's February. I'm like, okay, it's hot enough. Sure, we'll go. We're on the way to Coogee Beach, but obviously because we wasted so much time, the sun is setting while we're driving there. So we're literally in the car. I'm eating KFC. I'm holding his burger out to him, feeding him while he's driving. And we're driving to Coogee and the sun's setting. He looks out the window. He's like, oh, well, there you go. There's the sunset. And I was like, cool. Thanks. We also only spent one Christmas together, but both of our families were going away for Christmas. So instead we organized like a little thing about a week before Christmas so that we could actually see each other. The deal was that he would pick me up from work, we'd go back to my house, we'd have a nice dinner with family, and we'd do gift exchange. This boy forgets to pick me up from work. And no, this is not the same day as the story I told in my first video. This was a separate occasion where he also forgot to pick me up from work. And so I had to call my mum to come pick me up, once again on the phone in tears, being like, he's ditched me at work. Anyway, we get back to my house, his family comes over, and we do gift exchange. And look, I get it. Gifts are not the be all end all in a relationship. But in saying that, it's the thought behind the gift. I just find the actual gesture itself so much more beautiful than the gift. Like, I put so much time and effort and thought into his gifts. And I wrapped everything really beautifully. I packaged everything really beautifully. I made sure it looked all nice and presentable for him. And you know, at the time I was 18 and I was working as a casual at Priceline, so I wasn't exactly the epitome of wealth. So I did spend more money on him than kind of what I could afford at the time. At the time, he had a really decent job. He was earning more than double what I was. Anyway, we do our gift exchange and he literally just passes me like a puzzle and like this stuffed toy that he didn't even bother to wrap. Just passes it to me. He's like, here you go. And I'm like, cool, thanks. While we're on the topic of gift giving, like I mentioned in my first video, we were together for a year and a half. So on our 1 year anniversary, what I did was that I made him a photo album, and with every photo that I stuck down, I wrote like the memory attached to it. So on the actual day of our anniversary, I think I literally saw him for about 2 seconds. He drove by my house, I gave him his gift, and then he had to rush home because he had to do something for his parents. Anyway, so a couple days after our actual anniversary, that's when we went out. We went to the movies. We're on our way into the movie theater and he turns to me and he goes, oh, by the way, I didn't know what to get you, so I just didn't bother getting you anything. After I spent all that time making his gift for him and he couldn't be bothered to do anything. Seriously, when it comes to this stuff, like, girls are so easy. I am a flowers and chocolates and romance kind of girl. Literally a bundle of $15 flowers from Woolies. I would have cried with joy. A couple months before I broke up with him, we were given an opportunity to house sit for one of my mum's friends. And I had been having my doubts about the relationship for a while at this point. So I thought, okay, good. This is a great opportunity. This is the true test to see. So we were going to be house sitting for 10 days. And the house that we were staying at was not in the nicest area. The front gate to the house wasn't one that locked. It was just like a sliding gate. And then the lock on the back door of the house was broken. And in my mind, I was like, oh my God, this is literally going to be the evidence that they use in the Netflix documentary made about my murder. And I remember saying to him, I was like, whatever you do, I do not care what you do during the day. Please, please, please just be here by the time it's dark, because I do not want to be left in this house alone. Do you think he committed to that? No. He was out the door 8:30, 9 a.m. every morning to go to the gym, and I wouldn't see him until after I got home from work. So one day I had to go home for the day because my car was due for a service. And I was on my way back to the house we were house sitting at. And I called him before I left and I said, can you please make sure that you are at the house by the time I get there or before I get there, because by the time I get there, it's going to be dark and I don't want to be left alone. And he was like, yep, I'm leaving right now. We'll get there at the same time. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I'm on my way. I get to the house and he's not there. Like, his car's not there. And so I call him and I'm like, hey, where are you? He's like, oh, I haven't left my house yet. I was like, I specifically asked you to not leave me alone in this house at nighttime by myself. And I was so upset. And so he gets to the house and I'm trying really hard to express how I'm feeling and why I'm feeling that way. But I used to always find it very difficult to communicate my emotions. My car really needed petrol, so we went to the petrol station and we're there and I do it and I go in by myself, which he should, again, dodgy area, he should have gotten out of the car, done my petrol for me, just taken my card, gone paid for it and then back, but whatever, that's a different issue. I get back in the car and he just goes, are you done now? Because you're being really childish. And I was like, I'm not being childish. I'm upset because I specifically asked you not to leave me alone in that house at nighttime. And that's exactly what you've done. When I broke up with him, it wasn't just a spur of the moment decision. It was something that I had been really churning through in my mind for quite some time. And it got to a point where I considered going on a break. But I knew that that was just going to be my easy way out of the relationship. However, our relationship had gotten to a point where our communication was really, really poor. And any communication we had, I was the one to initiate it. I was always the one to send him that cute good morning text or just to check in with him, see how his day was going. All of my texts usually went unanswered, or it would take him a whole 24 hours or even a couple days before he got back to me. And this wasn't just something that happened towards the end of our relationship. That was something that was consistent throughout the entire relationship. I got to a point where I was like, you know what? I've had enough of this. I'm the one to always reach out and communicate with him. So I stopped. I stopped being the first to text. I stopped being the first to call. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to actually wait and see how long it takes for this boy to reach out to me. One of the things that was really holding me back from breaking up with him was I was very scared of what my life would look like without him. However, when I decided to cut off communication, I thought surely it won't take him more than like a day or two to reach out to me. Oh, I was wrong. It took him a week. And during that week, I went off to uni, went to work, did all my study, spent some time with friends. I was totally okay. I was totally okay living life by myself. So we get to the end of the week when he finally calls me. I'd just gotten home from work, and at this point I was absolutely fed up. He calls me on the phone and he says, what's going on? I haven't heard from you all week. And I said to him, yes, because I'm always the first one to reach out. I'm always the one to text. I'm always the one to call. And he said, yeah, well, I like it when you do that. And I said to him, don't you think I would like it if you reached out to me first? And he did have a moment of being like, oh yeah, I know what you mean. The day before I broke up with him, I was at an absolute breaking point. I had been holding on to hope for so long, and I was at a point where I was like, I cannot do this anymore. He picks me up from work, we're in the car, we're talking, and I just start crying because I'm so emotional, I'm so upset, I want to break up with him, but I really, really do not know how to approach the situation. He's like, what's wrong? What's going on? And I just made up some like bullshit excuse about being upset about him moving to the army. I was like, oh, I'm just so sad about you leaving, like I don't want you to go, which was true, but it wasn't the truth at that moment. He drops me home, I get out the car, he tells me he loves me. I don't say it back because like in that moment I physically could not bring myself to tell him that I loved him, because if I did then I would have been lying. Because if I'm being 100% honest, by that point, like, yes, I cared about him very much. I cared about him very deeply, but my love for him had faded. And so I didn't say I loved him back. And he was like, do I get a kiss? And I was like, yeah. And I literally pecked him on the cheek. How pathetic is that? Oh my God. Anyways, I go inside. I did not get a text from him checking in on me. I didn't get a phone call. I didn't get a, are you okay? I didn't get a, I love you. Like, I got nothing. And so that night, I was on the phone with one of my friends and she was really talking me through it. And I deleted every single photo of him off of my phone, off of my laptop. I had all these photos of us in my room. I took them all down. I grabbed all of his stuff, jumpers, photos, little bits and pieces, shoved it all in a big plastic rubbish bag and shoved it in the corner of my wardrobe, because I knew in my mind I had to break up with him and I was going to do it the next day. And I knew that when I got home after breaking up with him, the last thing I'd want to see is like his face plastered all over my bedroom. Now for the actual breakup. So I drive over to his house, we're sitting in the car and I break up with him. I'm sobbing, I'm upset, I'm trying to get the words out, I'm beating around the bush, but eventually I finally get the words out and I say, I'm breaking up with you. And the entire time this is happening, he is just sitting there in absolute silence. And when I finally get the words out, I'm breaking up with you, the first thing he says is, what a waste of money. And I thought he was joking. So I was like, what? And he said, what a waste of money. I spent so much money on you. And then I just kind of brushed that comment off because I was like, okay, whatever, I'm not getting into it. And then I'm kind of talking a bit more and I just say to him, like, I just want to know that you're going to be okay. And then he goes, I'll be okay. I have the gym. Unlike you, you have nothing. And as he said that, when he was like, unlike you, you have nothing, he like tapped me on the nose. I cannot begin to explain how much I hate it when someone taps me on the nose, because it is so patronizing. But like I said in my first part, this boy was cruel with his words, and in this moment I had really hurt him, and so he decided to try and hurt me back. Also, you know how I mentioned in part 2 how he sent my sister that message? That's like the 4th or 5th time that he's reached out to me or one of my family members since I broke up with him. So about 3 months after I broke up with him, he messaged me. Because when we were together, my parents like got him this job. He messaged me because he was going for this new job, but he needed the contact information of his last boss. So he messaged me to get the contact information from my mum to then give to him. His message was literally, can you do me a favor? And that like made me so mad. I was like, the audacity of this boy asking me to do him a favor after the way he treated me and spoke to me throughout the entire relationship and also during the breakup. The second time he messaged me like a year after we broke up, and it was really random because it was like really late at night, and it just says, hey, I know I was an ass during the breakup, but I just wanted to let you know that I finally got into the army and the time we spent together was some of my happiest so far. And like, yeah, I guess that was good closure in a way, because I knew that like he finally got into the army, so he was going to be moving, so I wouldn't like have to see him or bump into him anywhere. And yeah, I appreciated the fact that he apologized for being like a dick during the breakup, but I'm like, what about the rest of the relationship? And what really got me about that message was, in his mind, our relationship was some of his happiest moments. In my mind, our relationship was the most painful, most hurtful, most traumatic time of my life. It has taken a lot for me to heal from the way he treated me and for me to learn what I'm worth and what I deserve when it comes to relationships with men.
My wife is cold and distant towards me since I helped an ex during a bad time. I, male 35, was in a long-term relationship with a woman, female 33, between the ages I was 20 to 30. Then she left for a job in another state. Later, she told me LDR didn't work, long distance relationship, so we broke up and I discovered that she was engaged. I met my wife a year later, and honestly, I don't think I ever knew what love was before I met her. Everything is different with her, and love is so easy and not an uphill battle all the time like I realized my former relationship was. I'm trying not to bash my ex or relationship. We grew up together and we learned a lot, but sometimes you hate something and that turns out to be a good thing. And this for me was the ending of my relationship. I was very sad and devastated, but looking back, I'm happy it happened, or I wouldn't have known what true love or happiness is. At the same time, I met my ex-wife. My ex moved back and she said that she regretted ending things and that we loved each other. I wasn't in love with her anymore and I turned her down. She's still a good friend and I like her as a friend. She is, however, my sister's best friend. My wife knows her and she's never been threatened by her because we have always had a solid relationship. Well, that's good. My ex's mom unfortunately passed away suddenly and she has been inconsolable and broken since. I cannot even imagine the pain. My sister is devastated too and she has been by her side. I have been supportive and it felt very appropriate. My sister encouraged me to be there and support our friend. My wife didn't mind in the beginning, but I felt that she started being uncomfortable, that I went on walks and hikes with my ex. But it was doing her good to keep her mind off of things, and I found my wife's coldness uncalled for. I never experienced her as cold-hearted or callous, but here we are. She just didn't like the mention of my ex, so I didn't mention her either. Then a week after New Year's, my sister planned a week's vacation for her and her husband, my ex, me, and another couple that my sister and ex are friends with. My wife this time was very upset and said that she didn't want me to go. She asked why she wasn't invited then if it was just an innocent hangout. My sister said that this was ridiculous because we've been friends since high school, but my wife said that my sister never really liked her. I thought she was being unfair and ridiculous. However, she said that she didn't want me to be on that trip. After the trip, my wife has been different. She isn't rude or upset or sad, but she just doesn't engage with me. Oh, shite, she's to indifference. She doesn't start conversations. When I try to confront her, she doesn't engage in arguments. I don't know what to do. She doesn't even think that something has changed. When I am going out, she doesn't even care. If I go on a hike with my ex, she doesn't get bothered. Also, when my sister had her birthday, my wife told me that morning that she was feeling sick and didn't want to risk infecting the others, and she just sent a text to my sister and a present with me. Now, on to what ended up being the last straw. My ex is having a birthday party on Friday. Both me and my wife are invited. My wife just said, sorry, I can't do it. I'm already booked for a work friend's birthday. I asked her why I wasn't invited, and she said that I was, but that she was taking her nephew, so I didn't need to go with her, so I could go to my party instead. This is very out of character for my wife, who would have tried to make other solutions like dropping by one party first and then the other, but she just didn't care. I asked her if she could come with me instead since her work colleague isn't a close friend, but she just dismissed me and laughed mirthfully, calling me ridiculous.
I figured out my dad cheated on my mom decades ago with the woman he is currently partnered with. Between 2011 and 2014, my mom had cancer. She passed near the end of 2014. I was 24 years old at the time. Around 2013, I found 2 nude photos on my dad's computer. One was a woman around his age, which was around 60 years old. I assumed he had figured out how to use a computer for I was grossed out, but realized it made sense, and so I healed. In 2015, in under 6 months after my mom had passed, he went back to his home country to sort out some of his businesses. He was already dating some women who he was friends with in his childhood. I suddenly had an intuition that this was the woman from the photos from his computer, but I couldn't remember the face clearly and had no proof anymore. I did try calling him out, but I was wishy-washy and uncertain. I asked about some scantily clad women on his computer. His response that he kept photos of all of his tenants in the apartments he owns in another country, so it was probably one of those. I confirmed he does keep their WhatsApp photos on his computer so he can match faces to emails. So I dropped it, as I had no proof of anything and thought maybe it was Fast forward to now. I'm 33 years old at this point. My dad and the woman have been partners for a decade. I visit and have dinner once a month or so. I needed a cell phone for something and my dad gave me his old one. After a few weeks, I was going through some files left over the phone. I found dressed photos of this woman on the phone. I checked the metadata on the phone and some were from a year or two before my mom passed. So now I know that before my mom died, my dad was getting selfies from his current partner. Suddenly, a puzzle piece clicked too. Something about how she looked reminded me of the nudes on the PC. I still can't be 100% certain the nudes were hers, but it is 100% certain he was involved with her in some way before my mom died. My dad never admits he's wrong. Anytime I've called him out on anything, he denies or puts it on me. So I feel mentioning it to him will just harm me. I've tried discussing this in therapy, but the therapist seems to brush over it. I guess they don't know what to do with it either. To make matters confusing, they both care about me. They have helped me through some very difficult times and have been there for me. So what do I do?